Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, the famous one here, and today I'm going to be talking about the UFO phenomenon that has been going on. And if you haven't heard the news, the U.S. intelligence released their UAP report, which today I'm going to be going over and just sort of give you my analysis of it, what I think the scope of it really means, and how we handle it from here. For those who are not familiar with my interest in UFOs, I pretty much had a very keen interest on it for a while now. So this is really the first time that the U.S. has really come forward and acknowledged that the UFOs do in fact exist, and they don't really have many answers. So I'm going to try to come up with my own answers after I read this report, and hopefully engage in some good conversation with everybody. Alright, so here it is. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has released this report. It is the preliminary assessment of UAPs. This was released on June 15th, 2021. So at the time of my video recording, this was just last week. So I will be providing a link in my video description so you guys can check it out for yourself and make your own assumptions. But so here we go. The scope and assumptions. The scope. This preliminary report is provided by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in response to the provision in Senate Report 116-233 accompanying the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, that the DNI, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense, is to submit an intelligence assessment of the threat posed by UAPs and the progress of the Department of Defense Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, UAPTF, has made in understanding this threat. Okay, so I think the important thing to get from this opening paragraph is they want to know if it poses any specific threat to the U.S. Navy and the U.S. National interests, basically. So you read here. See, that's what I'm getting from this, because if you read the last sentence, it mentions understanding the threat. So that's an important part. Remember that this whole thing is not their obsession with finding aliens or anything. They want to understand what they are in the first place, and does it pose a potential threat? Because you can see they say is to submit an intelligence assessment of the threat posed by UAP. So they're really gathering intelligence and trying to come up with a summary of what kind of threat this poses to the national security. So moving on, it just talks about basically the government body involved in the second paragraph. On to the third paragraph, it mentions the FBI, the NSA, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, FAA, Emerging Disruptive Technologies, National Counterintelligence and Security Center. So really, this goes to all the divisions of defense and intelligence, which is really interesting because it's really become a public knowledge now that these do in fact exist. So now they're trying to get in the bottom of it, of what kind of threat they actually pose. So that's the overall scope of the report. Moving on to the assumptions now. I'll just read a little bit of this. It says various forms of sensors that register UAP generally operate correctly and capture enough real data to allow initial assessments, but some UAP may be attributable to sensor anomalies. So basically what they're telling you there is that they're pretty much, they understand that radar systems and cameras that have captured these UAPs were generally functioning correctly. That there wasn't, it seems to be, if you've watched the videos of the USS Nimitz and the fighter jets capturing the UAPs on film and radar, they pretty much admit that it's not any kind of malfunction with the equipment, that these are in fact genuine images. They're not doctored in any way, they're not photoshopped, these are actual images. And but they do say some UAP may be attributable sensor anomalies, but I think that's very rare, especially with the specific videos that sort of spawned this whole report. They're pretty genuine if you hear anybody really talk about it. Okay, so then if you go on to page 3, it gives the executive summary. The limited amount of high-quality reporting on UAP hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions about the nature or intent of UAP. Alright, so really this is getting into the general summary, and they're really admitting now that it's hard for them to draw a firm conclusion of what it all means. What are the natures or intents of the UAPs? I don't think they don't really know. I mean, I think they would say if they knew what their intentions were. So it goes on to say the UAP task force considered a range of information on UAP described in U.S. military and intelligence community reporting, but because the reporting lacked sufficient specificity, ultimately recognized that a unique tailored reporting process was required to provide sufficient data for analysis of UAP events. So what they're saying there is they're really lacking conclusive data to really further analyze the events. In other words, they have a UAP moving across camera, they have visual observations, but they can't directly coordinate what they are, like what they're made of, where they come from, what their main purpose is. They really can't pinpoint any further analysis on it, because all they have is the initial images and radar captures. So basically goes on and say, as a result, the UAPTF concentrated its review on reports that occurred between 2004 and 2021. So this is spanning a couple decades here. I mean, you're going back to 2004 up until this year. The majority of which are a result of this new tailored process to better capture UAP events through formalized reporting. So basically what they're saying here is that they want to, any future UAP events they want to document. They're trying to put together a structured reporting system where they'll all be, I imagine, categorized and all laid out in a very detailed orientation where they'll be able to further analyze different UAPs, maybe the size, the shape, the speed, where they're located, things like that. So they want to try to better analyze them going forward. Most of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects, given that a majority of UAP were registered across multiple sensors to include radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapon seekers, and visual observation. So in summary, basically what that means is they do think they're physical objects. In other words, they're not mirages, they're not mirror images of anything else. They're not, you know, artificially created. These are actual physical objects that they're recording. And that has been verified from multiple sensors, as they mentioned: radar, infrared, optical, weapon seekers, and just regular visual observation, people seeing these things. And I think it's become very clear that they're actual real, and there's not any kind of fake things going on here. That they're actual genuine UAPs that people should be taken seriously. In a limited number of incidents, UAP reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. These observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperception, and require additional rigorous analysis. Okay, so this is where it gets kind of confusing, because they just say exhibit unusual flight characteristics. So for me, they're interpreting it as it could possibly be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperception. I don't know if that's the case here. I think that these UAPs are so extraordinary that people can't understand them completely, so that it's easy for them to come to the conclusion, well, oh well, it must be some kind of malfunction or system error that's making them pick up unusual flight patterns, when really I believe that that's actually how these things fly. Or I don't know if you would even call it flight, but these are how they move. So that there's no spoofing going on. It's just these things are so extraordinary that these people that witness it can't coherently interpret it, or understand what they're capable of. That's my opinion. Then it goes on, there are probably multiple types of UAP requiring different explanations based on a range of appearances and behaviors described in the available reporting. So multiple types of UAP. So it's not just one tic-tac. These are different shapes, sizes, just different physical characteristics. So it's not just one kind, is what they're saying here. Our analysis of the data supports the construct that if and when individual UAP incidents are resolved, they will fall into one of 5 potentially explanatory categories: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, USG or U.S. industrial developmental programs, foreign adversary systems, and a catch-all or other bin. So now it sounds like they want to try to categorize them now, which is that can be kind of tricky. I don't know if you can really distinguish one from another, because they're so diverse, but it looks like they're going to try to. Natural atmospheric phenomena. Like, what is even that? Aside from like strange looking clouds and lightning or some kind of electrical, like electrical ball or some sort. Because I've heard of those electrical static balls that people um, have seen before, but those are mostly on the ground. So that's kind of interesting that they would mention natural atmospheric phenomena. Okay. Um, Then it goes on, UAP clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to U.S. national security. Interesting. That's a very interesting statement there. So basically, I think what they're coming to conclusion with there is that there's safety of flight issue. I think that would be including any commercial airlines, personal aircraft, anything like that, anything up in the sky. It could pose a potential safety issue, which makes sense because these things are flying around at hypersonic speed. If one of them should hit an aircraft or a helicopter, I mean, serious issue there. And the other part of that may pose a challenge to U.S. national security. I think that's the big one to take away from this, because yeah, of course it poses a flight issue, but really there hasn't been any documented, I think confirmed documented incidents where a UAP has actually hit an airplane or a helicopter. So I think the biggest threat is to national security because they don't know what these things are. So they go on, safety concerns primarily center on aviators contending with an increasingly cluttered air domain. UAP would also represent a national security challenge if they are a foreign adversary collection platforms or provide evidence of potentially adversary has developed either a breakthrough or disruptive technology. Listen guys, that's the most bold paragraph I think in this whole report, is them mentioning that UAPs could potentially be an adversary technology. So in other words, it could be Chinese, it could be Russian technology. I think those are the two most probable. If these things are from Earth, is probably one of those two adversaries. Okay, so then it goes on talking about a little bit about USG data at the end there. But then when you go on to page 4, they start out by saying available reporting largely inconclusive. Okay, so they don't really know what these things are. Limited data and inconsistency in reporting are key challenges to evaluating UAP. So limited data, in other words, the only data they have is the radar documentation, specific witness encounters, and the videos. You really can't make a formal report on just those things. I mean, you can't go into detail about what they actually are. I think that's essentially what they're saying, is that you can't conclusively say what exactly they are, where they come from, just by camera visuals. That's what they're saying there. All right, so then they talk about a little a little bit about the reports from witnesses. After carefully considering this information, the UAP task force focused on reports that involved UAP largely witnessed firsthand by military aviators and that were collected from systems we consider to be reliable. So yeah, these are highly credible witnesses that have encountered these things. So I think it really has to end there with all the misinterpretations that people get, that people are like crazy if they see these things or are not mentally stable who see UFOs. Like, no, these have been seen by Navy pilots and very high-ranking officials in the military who've actually witnessed these things and recorded them. And then in the middle of page 4, they go on to say 144 of the reports, of the 144, 80 reports involved observation with multiple sensors. Most reports described UAP as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. So that pretty much confirms that they're real and authentic, that multiple sensors have been picking them up. So in other words, it's not just one malfunctioning radar system or one malfunctioning camera. Like, no, these were picked up by multiple sensors. And the fact that they've been happening a lot around pre-planned training or other military activity, they have an interest in the U.S. military. I mean, that's clear. What kind of interest they have and what kind of information that they're collecting is really, no one really knows. I mean, you can make assumptions that, you know, they have some kind of interest in our Navy and our military, things like that. So it goes on to say, they talk a little bit about UAP collection challenges. A basic summary of this is that their sensors aren't specifically designed to collect information on these UAPs. I think that's why they have limited data on these things to begin with, because they originally weren't designed to pick up these things. So it's really hard for them to distinguish their origin or what they're made out of, or what their technologies are, things like that. Okay, so then moving on to page 5, it goes on to talk about their shape, size, propulsion systems. UAP sightings also tended to cluster around U.S. training and testing grounds. We talked a little bit about that. What is their interest in our military? A handful of UAP appeared to demonstrate advanced technology. I think this is a good time to talk about the 5 specific UFO traits. If you guys aren't familiar with that, I can provide a link to that as well, to the history website where they talk a little bit about the technologies. First one being anti-gravity lift. Number 2, sudden and instantaneous acceleration. These things can go from like 0 to 1,000 miles per hour, like that. Number 3, hypersonic velocities without signatures. In other words, they leave no trail smoke or any kind of comet trail or anything. They just move without any kind of trace at all, really. Number 4, low observability or cloaking. These things have been known to disappear just like out of the blue, which is really, really fascinating. And then number 5, transmedium travel. These things have been known to fly through water, air, and really possibly space as well, but they definitely confirmed to go into water, and some observers have seen them come up from water as well. So where are they going to underwater? That's a really interesting question. So it says in 18 incidents described out of 21 reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Some UAP appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. So these things are literally defying physics in the air, moving against the wind, moving from point A to point B and like back and forth without any kind of propulsion. It's really incredible. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems process radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. That's interesting. So is there some kind of radio frequency that these things are using to coordinate their movements? That's a really interesting question. So then in summary, on page 5, they say UAP probably lack a signal explanation. So they really have no idea about these things. Some of their ideas: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, like I don't even know what that can mean. Oh, so they go on to describe that as natural atmospheric phenomena includes ice crystals, moisture, and thermal fluctuations, and may register on some infrared and radar systems. Like, yeah, that's probably possible, but I don't think that's a legit explanation for these things. So me personally, I would cross that one right off. Developmental programs, forward and adversary systems, we talked about that a little bit already. And okay, so going on to page 6, they talk about the UAP potential threat to flight safety and possibly national security. So yeah, I think I'll wrap this video here, talking about a little bit about that. Yeah, so I think that's really a bombshell. That what this report says is that it could potentially be an adversary, which is really, I think, a challenge for the U.S. intelligence to understand what kind of security threat this actually poses, because these things have technology from 1,000 years in advance in the future. Like, the U.S. has essentially admitted that this isn't our technology. So whose is it, and why are they observing us? I think that's really the bombshell that this report gives off, is that they admit they're real, and it could potentially be a national security risk. That's huge. We continue to monitor for evidence of such programs given the counterintelligence challenge they would pose, particularly as some UAP have been detected near military facilities or by aircraft carriers detected by USG's most advanced sensor systems. Yeah, I think that has been one of the characteristics of UFOs for a long time, is their interest in not only the Navy and aircraft carriers, but their training exercises, but also nuclear facilities. I've heard reports being around missile silos that harbor nuclear warheads in around Utah and Kansas, Nevada, around those areas. So whoever they are, they definitely have an interest in our weapons. Could they be an adversary from Russia and China? It's possible, but I think it's highly unlikely, because they're using technology that's thousands of years ahead of us, which is really hard to comprehend. If they're that far ahead with technology, the U.S. wouldn't have a chance against them. We just wouldn't. Or of course, the other alternative is that these things are from outer space and they're here just to see what kind of technologies we have and how advanced we are as a species. So those are two very interesting scenarios to get out of this report, but both of them are equally troubling, to say the least. I would rather it be aliens, because if they're adversaries with this technology, then that could pose a serious national security risk to the United States. So if it's aliens, we really don't know what their intentions are, but from what we've seen from UAPs, is they really haven't posed any kind of aggressive behaviors, or they're not intentionally trying to cause harm or issues to any aircraft or anything like that. So I don't think they're here to cause trouble. That's a good sign. If they are actually alien in spacecraft. If they're adversaries, then we have no idea what they're up to. No idea. So then they just go on to say that they want to collect more data on these things and try to figure out what exactly they are and why they're here, what they're doing. So that's an interesting report, to say the least. So yeah, you guys can read it and come up with your own assessment of it and what you think. What's your overall takeaway from this report? I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about this report. It's really interesting to read and know that they've actually admitted to these things being legit and authentic. So there is a lot happening in the UFO community right now, and this is really exciting to be part of this and really go along for the ride. Who knows where this is going to take us. This is the preliminary assessment. Maybe we'll get a more in-depth assessment later on that really goes into detail about these things, but I think that's good for right now. I think I'll wrap up this video. I want to hear you guys' opinions, what you think about this report, and yeah, we'll see if any new data comes up on UFOs. I'm really excited to see what happens. I'll keep you guys posted if I find anything else interesting. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, I hope you've been enjoying my very first video on UFOs. So I just wanted to give a quick update on everything in summary here. After watching the UFO Declassified live TV special that they had last week, I just wanted to give you my insight on what they had to say and my overall summary on the whole subject. So if you were able to catch the special, it was on a bunch of cable channels last week. It was called UFO Declassified Live, and they had a whole panel of experts on the subject matter give their assessment on the whole report. Sort of like I kind of did with this first part of the video, but they really go into depth on specific videos, which I shared clips to you at the beginning of this whole video. And really, it's really intriguing hearing the experts give their using their understanding of the whole subject going back. I mean, they were talking about going back decades ago, when these things were first being reported. There's been witnesses from going all the way back this whole century. Since really, I imagine from the beginning of time. I mean, you go back to like the Mexicans doing like hieroglyphs. I don't know what you call them, but the sketches and of UFOs and aliens and walls. I mean, that goes back like millennia probably, but really since the invention of cameras and video recorders, we've been getting better documentation, obviously, of this subject. And so, but really, this UFO footage captured by the Navy and fighter pilots really give intriguing new evidence to UFOs, or as they like to call them, UAPs. And if you look at the videos and the screenshots, it's really remarkable. My overall summary on the whole thing is, like, yeah, they're unidentified, and it's hard to tell exactly what they are because the radar images and the camera footage that they took, it's still kind of I wouldn't say grainy, but just really the object is so far away that you really can't get an overall visual representation of the entire object. You can see like the overall shape of the one as it's like rotating in the air. That one's probably the best close up image of all of them that I've seen. And what another remarkable one was the one that was splashing in and out of water at the end. I mean, that's unbelievable. Like, before I learned more and more about UFOs, I used to just think they were in the sky, doing whatever up there, but these things are transmedium, which means they go in and out of waters as well as the air, which is really incredible. And they could also be going in and out of space. I think we have yet to capture them actually entering the atmosphere, that sort of thing, but these things move at incredible speed and their capabilities are just out of this world. And all I gotta say is, if this is foreign technology, I think that we're in deep trouble as far as from a military perspective, because hearing these experts talk about it, they can jam weapon systems, they can scramble radar, so they can avoid all kind of detection, and also suppress any kind of weapons against them. So I mean, if a foreign adversary was to use that kind of thing in their arsenal to prevent detecting them on radar and jamming weapon systems, I mean, that's so far in the future, and that technology is so advanced that if these are this is a foreign superpower with these technologies. I think that gives them um, an outstanding advantage over the U.S. because from what I've heard, I don't believe this is U.S. technology. I just think that the chances of that are just too extreme. I mean, like, I suppose there's very little possibility that it's a secret U.S. government project, but I think the chances of that are very, very minuscule to remote, especially after watching the program and hearing, former intelligence officers talk about and that sort of thing, and um, and hearing the one scientist give his overall assessment, like he pretty much sees it as face value. In other words, he doesn't believe in them 100% just because he doesn't have that actual physical evidence to observe and study. I mean, all we have is this footage, right? I mean, you can only tell so much from the footage and give like an overall visual assessment about what's there, but until we actually have a craft, which who knows, the government could already have a craft that they're not telling us about, right? But until the public sees that, and until the scientists actually study that sort of thing, I think this whole um, this whole UFO phenomenon is sort of be up in the air, um, kind of thing where you can give your opinion about the whole thing, but as far as seeing like actual evidence, I think that we need that real piece of evidence in front of us to give an evaluation on. It's sort of like Bigfoot, right? I mean, you've heard about these encounters, you see grainy footage, but until you actually have a living Bigfoot or a corpse that they can study, no one's going to believe it 100%, right? Same kind of thing with this, but and so I wanted to close this up by giving my overall summary on the whole thing. Um, I wouldn't really consider UFO a paranormal thing anymore, just because I think the evidence now is so substantiated and so credible now that you really can't say that UFOs are sort of folklore now or sort of like a paranormal entity, because they're actually real. Like these things, whatever you want to call them or wherever they come from, they actually exist because you can see that they're actually there. But it's hard to determine what they are and where they come from. But yeah, it's sort of like a ghost. Like I believe in spirits as well, and you can see they have different footage on there, some more telling than others, but you can tell that spirits do exist and that they're actually real. But again, it's sort of like I think spirits are more paranormal though, because there's really much more mystery to them as opposed to these where you can actually visually see, but much like ghosts though and spirits, you have no idea where UFOs come from. Like you can only guess. Um, so my honest opinion is, I just think the technology is so advanced that I think the chances of that being a foreign adversary like Russia or China are very, very slim. So in other words, that only leaves the possibility that these are extraterrestrial. And look, they could be. You know what? They very well may be from another world. Like, you can't rule that out at this point, but I don't think there's any intelligence that says that this is a foreign technology. So that's really intriguing. And the whole UFO report is a preliminary assessment. So this could go a number of different directions, right? Who knows what's going to come of this down the road, but very interesting video, very interesting take by the experts, all giving their expert analysis on the whole subject matter. Is really, I encourage you all that are interested in this sort of thing to watch the whole program and read the report and make an assessment for yourself. I think people are going to have different opinions on the whole thing, but I do actually 100% believe in UFOs. Sort of earlier in my life, I was a skeptic, but I've had a couple of questionable things that I've seen for myself. One was when I was in the early 2000s. I want to say it was around maybe between 2000 to 2002. I seen an orangish sort of like glowing ball in the sky. It was moving around really slowly. It was way off in the distance. This wasn't like anything close, but it was like this bright orange glowing ball. It was really bizarre, and it wasn't blinking. It was just a solid light. So I don't know if anyone else have ever seen anything like that. And my second witness report, this was a few years ago. I was driving down the highway, and what originally caught my eye was the very unique cloud pattern up in the sky. So I was just looking up in the sky as I was driving south up at the clouds, and then this very like bright, sort of like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a raindrop on the window and the sunlight comes through. It gives like sort of like a shiny appearance to it, like a silhouette kind of thing almost. That's what I seen up in the sky, this like bright silverish shiny thing that was sort of like giving a transparent raindrop glow kind of thing. And it was up in the sky. I seen it for probably 5 seconds, and then it just slowly dimmed until it faded away. It was like really, really weird. And I wish I had a camera at the time. I would have took a picture, but I didn't really have any means of doing that in either of my accounts, which would have been really interesting to take those photographs. But from then till now, hearing this report, I'm 100% a believer, and it'll be interesting to see where this whole thing goes from here. So I hope you guys enjoyed my whole UFO video, and love to hear you guys' comments. Let's have some healthy discussion about the subject matter, and till next time, hope you enjoyed my first video.